Are we live? We having a technical glitch? So, while you guys work on the TV, are we live?
No. The mics aren't on apparently because the TVs aren't on, and I don't.
Okay, we got mics.
System's off. Now it's on.
We got mics.
You're good.
Okay, we're good? All right, good evening, everybody. What we're going to do tonight is just simply have a town hall format. I would much rather be sitting out there, but we decided it's probably best to sit back here just because of the microphones. And so I would just ask anybody, you can, the council, I'll let Doug talk in a minute about some of the scheduling, but we're not here to make decisions. We're really here to answer any questions any residents have on any subjects, right? And so what I'd ask you to do is when you have a question, please come on up to the microphone, introduce yourself, give us your address, and then we can go ahead and just have a dialogue. And if you have if you want a specific somebody to answer, if you would just let us know, and then we'll go ahead and do that. Doug, can you talk a little bit about the scheduling? I know there's some travel involved. And the other council members were not going to attend the...
Right, Mr. Mayor, they have two council members that are out of the country, actually, and one council member that had a conflict tonight that was not able to make it, so that's why you're here.
So just for the record, I am going to schedule another one of these probably in July. The timing on this one was just rather unfortunate because of the travel. But I'll have another one of these probably in the July time frame. So with that, we're going to open it up. We're here to answer any questions you have. So somebody want to be first?
Be brave.
Nobody has
Your
any
meeting,
questions.
you guys.
This is your meeting. It's your chance to ask about anything. Go ahead.
Carol,
Come
looks
on
like
up.
you want to come up.
Pardon me?
Looks like you're ready to go.
Oh, no, I was just...
Oh, okay. It just looked like...
I just was waiting to see if anybody else was coming.
Okay.
So, well, I don't want to sit here and drag this up.
I have a question.
Well,
Yep,
wonderful.
come on up.
I just was waiting to see if anybody else had one. Carol D'Elise, 8320 Roy Street. And I haven't been to as many council meetings as I was before. I'm taking care of a parent who has dementia, and so I'm not around as much as I was before. So you may have addressed this, and I haven't had a chance to read all of the minutes and watch the videos. So my question is about, and see if you can address this for me, is senior housing. Where are we with that, and how are we moving forward with senior housing in Victoria? As I look at Carver County, we are a city without any senior housing for our seniors. And even though we are doing a good job with providing one-level senior facilities or townhomes, which was on our survey that we did about 4 years ago, which is what people had asked for, was one-level senior housing. The price point is a little higher than what people were hoping for at that time. But I'm just that's my question: is where are we within the development of senior housing for our citizens in Victoria?
I'll add a few comments. Doug, you're more familiar with some of the details up behind the Lions, the field.
Bethesda came forward with
Bethesda.
Right.
Can you give a quick briefing on Bethesda?
Well, the people that own the facility right behind Lions, Bethesda, are going to reconstruct that whole thing, tear down what's there existing. That they've already notified the people that are in that facility that they have to move out of there. I think within the next few months, and their intent is to redevelop that whole building area there with some townhouses. That would be partially occupied by people that have some disabilities, but also occupied by people, senior citizens and other residents that don't meet criteria for having disabilities. So it's sort of a mixed bag. It's their new approach of trying to integrate people that do have some disabilities with residents that don't have disabilities. So it would be one complex, and it would have they're talking about some kind of a community center type building where there would be activities planned, and there will be some services, I think, for people that have some disability needs, but there will be also houses in that area for seniors or residents that don't have disabilities. I think the other thing we've talked about for seniors is up on the 13.5 acres. I think the county EDA has some abilities to work on some housing up in that area, and we haven't gone very far with that, but I think that's a proposal that could happen at some point.
Thanks, Doug. Councilmember Gregory?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add to that. The Bethesda, from my understanding, there was some market rate and some low-cost type senior housing as well. And the 13 acres, Tim Nichols has brought forward a couple of different proposals, but again, those are somewhat stalled from my understanding as well. So we keep hoping that something, and certainly the CDA is on board with doing something, but it sounds like they're going to need some help as well, some infrastructure help. So there's going to have to be a combination of other projects to come forward before we can just go ahead with the senior housing. It can't stand alone, is what I'm saying. So we need something else to go with the 13 acres. It can't just be senior housing. Any follow-up?
And I'm not sure how this is going to work or what the protocol is for tonight.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
I know about a year ago there was a gentleman, his name escapes me right now. He presented a proposal for the 13 acres where it was going to be a co-op, a senior housing, and underneath the senior housing was going to be like, example, like a Subway or something because they aren't going to be able to walk into town. And then there was also the idea of a grocery store and then a plat for 2 restaurants. Where are we with it? Did that kind of die, or what happened to that proposal? That sounded wonderful.
Right, that is the one that I was referring to. Tim Nichols was the gentleman, and he did come back, I think, last fall as well. So he's still thinking about it, but just from my understanding, I think there is maybe a grocery store component that is kind of the key to making that work, and that's not on board yet.
Okay.
And one of the things with the grocery store, so I've talked with a lot of regional and national chains specifically about a grocery store, and every one of them to date has said the same 3 things. Number one, where Fresh Seasons used to be is it's too big for a small convenience grocery store, and it's too small for a big grocery store. The second point they've made consistently, no matter who I spoke with, is the parking questions. And then finally, the other point that came up is with the Hy-Vee going in at down on 212. That gave them a little bit of concern, right? Because it's competition. So I can tell you that there's still some interest, but I don't know of anything that's solid. Going back to your senior housing comment, I have a meeting coming up with somebody. I don't have any of the details yet, and I don't know how realistic it is, but it may involve some senior housing in grocery store. Until I meet with them, the meeting's, I think, later this month. Until I actually sit and meet with them, I don't really have any details, right? What I will promise you is once I meet with them, if there's something realistic here, I'll make sure to put an announcement out so that the residents know. At the end of the day, I would like to see us get senior housing. And the Charles Cudd homes are beautiful homes, but not everybody wants to pay, $850,000 for a home. So this Bethesda has possibilities. We don't know what the financing mechanism is going to be. We don't know if they're going to ask the city for money. And that will, I think, at the end of the day, this will where the rubber will meet the road. If they're going to want city involvement, I think they need to make a compelling case why the taxpayers of Victoria would need to contribute to that. So there's Bethesda may materialize into something we just don't know yet. The 13.5 acres may materialize, and there is other developers that are asking some preliminary questions, but I wouldn't call that as anything as concrete or solid. It's just some very early conversations are starting to occur. What I will tell you, though, as soon as anything materializes, I'll make sure that we put something out so the residents can see that and can provide input to it long before it ever becomes a reality. So.
It's been on, with the national.
Let me interrupt for just a second. I don't know if the people at home can pick you up.
On the national component,
Thank you.
we did the survey, and I just reread that again. It came up constantly: senior housing, senior housing, senior housing, senior housing. And then you look over at Excelsior; they just put up 2 senior housing. The Waters will be opening up in November, and they just finished the landing, and they're kitty corner from each other. And how they came up with that, that happened so quickly with both of those, and they both are. I know the Waters is independent, assisted, and memory care as well, and there are about 115 rooms or apartments for the Waters, and it'd be nice if we had something like that in Victoria. It's something that the citizens keep asking for in our city, and it's something that we need to provide, and it's been ongoing for a very long time. From that initial thing that the Victoria for a Lifetime Committee did 4 or 5 years ago when we met in groups around the city and did that survey. And so it's something that I think that we need to continue to move forward with as much as we can.
Yeah, anytime there's any developers expressing interest in that, absolutely we want to have those conversations and encourage them. But at the end of the day, the developer has to bring something forward. And hopefully some of the conversations will have something. And you made a good point. The pace of any development, a lot of times, at least to a certain extent, is controlled by the developer themselves. There's certain things that we as a city have to do to meet certain statutory requirements. But if a developer wants to push a development quickly, the city will work with them to move that as quickly as we can through the process. So if we have a developer that becomes eager and wants to do that, I'm sure the city would be willing to work with them as long as we can find the right kind of a deal. But at the end of the day, we're not going to move so fast that financially it doesn't make sense for the city, right? And that's where to me, is always going to be the difficult question, is how do we determine on the financing, right?
We seem to be developing houses that are, $700,000, $800,000, and when you look at the chart, Victoria comes out as the high-end housing in Carver County, and we're going to price our seniors out of our city because we don't have kind of housing that they can afford, and that continues to be a process, even with the townhomes you're building.
Right.
That they didn't ask for $600,000 townhomes; they asked for townhomes that were in the 250 range, and we're not providing that for them, and nor are we providing senior housing for them. And so I think we need to listen to what our seniors were asking for, and if we can do that, that would be wonderful.
I would love to see us get homes at $250,000, but again,
It's possible, but we need to provide senior housing for our seniors.
right. So,
And I just want to know where we were with that. Thank you.
yep.
Dick Hawley, 5641 Sumber Drive. I just wanted to bring up the fact that we have been talking about senior housing in the steering committee for the comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
And we firmly believe that what we should be doing is providing support for those who have lived in Victoria all their life to be able to stay in the city and to have some form of senior housing. So we've been working hard on the plan to try to get the zoning and the other things into play with single level, or if you're going to mix this with a grocery store, an example might be the grocery on the base level and then have elevators to go to an upper level so that you've got resources available for those that are living in the homes. And I know the other thing that we've been discussing is that we're looking for what kind of employment do we have in the city of Victoria if, in fact, we don't really have any big industrial areas to be able to do something. And one of the fastest growing areas for employment actually is medical. And so being able to work, to be able to provide nursing, being able to provide home services and other pieces to that should also be a component. Now, I don't know if the two of you have had a chance with the draft of what's going on in the, for the long-term plan, if you've had a chance to look at it and comment on that aspect of it. There was one other piece that I would like to see commented in that context, and that's that we saw here recently in the news that Forest Lake was being approached to put in a mental health facility for youth, and they're looking for a home for something like that. So maybe another consideration would be to try to select an appropriate area to be able to have some kind of beds and so forth available for mental health for youth, as well as what might be required for doing dementia care and other things for seniors.
Thanks, Dick. Go ahead.
I don't have a whole lot to add to that.
We did have a chance just recently, Councilmember Gregory and I met with the consultant on the comprehensive plan and got a briefing on that, looked at a number of the details. I don't have it here in front of me right now, but we did make a number of suggestions. One of the things that I would like to see, and I believe you were looking at this also, if you take County Road 11 and you go from the intersection at Floyd's and you start going south, those homes from there up to the church, potentially zone that such that if professional services want to come in there to kind of expend or extend, if you will, the business district, if those homeowners want to go ahead and put in like a law office or something that doesn't require a lot of parking in those kind of businesses, maybe we zone that mixed use so that we have the ability to have those kind of quaint shops. If you think of Excelsior, some of those homes along Water Street there have been converted. It's basically the same kind of concept. One of the other things that I would like to see done, and you've heard recently some discussion on parking and acquiring the privately owned land that's behind Vic's and Victoria House in Vic's. So there's been some discussion about acquiring property over at the Narkey property, building a facility and moving that owner out and all of their personal stuff into that other building. I don't think that's in our best interest, and the reason is I'd like to see, as we go down Steiger, because we've already approved that project, I'd like to see development go along there in some sort of, and I've been talking to people, there's nothing final, but some initial discussions have been something like 3-story mixed use where you've got commercial on the first floor and maybe residential up above, and maybe that residential could be senior housing, right, where you're right here in downtown. Now that we're going down Steiger, we're actually going to have a sidewalk in the power cable, or the overhead cables are all being buried. I think they're doing that right now. But it actually will extend our downtown and connect, if you will, to the east over towards Enki. So I think that possibility also exists with those properties. And how this ties back to this parking garage or this additional surface parking, if we move that building, all we're doing is moving the problem, right? I don't think we have to take that building for parking. There's other options that we should be looking at. To me, this is all part of, I would like to see the residents, and I'd like to put forward a couple of potential design choices, if you will, or concepts for our downtown that stretches all the way from where Steiger connects up to 5 down by the water sports all the way down to the Dairy Queen and where Alphabet Junction is, and see some sort of a comprehensive plan that ties that all together with, in my mind's eye, I'm thinking about Excelsior or quaint shops that are easily walkable And if we can incorporate, I'd love to see if we could get something like an urgent care or a small medical clinic to come in for our residents, and if we could get second and third story senior housing or other affordable housing in there, depending on what options are available. So clearly, this is just speculation. It's just talking about it and concepts and things that I'd like to do. But when we start talking about specifics like this property and moving it over, I think that's going to cause us problems in the long term. I want to see a comprehensive plan put together and then execute to that plan. So that may get some senior housing, and that may be incorporated into the comp plan, like what Dick was talking about. We'll have to see when the comp plan comes in front of the council and whether those changes are actually adopted or not. So.
And just to tag on, just to tag on to that a little bit, with the Comp 2040 plan, there were a number of commercial nodes. Rolling Acres Road, Highway 5 was one of them that comes to mind, and there's a couple of those embedded in the Comp 2040 plan. And each one of those nodes, and I just found this out, is scheduled to have 30% high-density housing. So apartment-type buildings, hopefully we can incorporate some, lower market rate type things, more affordable for senior housing. And certainly long range, I think the 13 acres is still our best bet for senior housing. That's personally my opinion. And we're always hoping and pushing that something comes forward with that.
So let me circle back one more time. These developers that I'm meeting with may be absolutely nothing. But by the time we get to, I think we should do another one of these in July, right? I was looking at the calendar. I can't remember not the 4th of July weekend, of course, but like a week or two after that. By then, we may have something more because there's some of these discussions occurring where we may be able to give you something more in Bethesda. Tim Nichols, I'm meeting with another big developer, and we'll see where that goes, right? But I will tell you that there is a lot of interest because Victoria and you kind of mentioned it, because of the people that live here and the economics of the people that live here, that is drawing developers. And we're now getting to the size. When you talk to some people, they say when you get to 10,000 people, and I don't know if we're close, I don't know if we're over or just under, but well, that's kind of a break point for a lot of these developers. And so we're right on the cusp of that today, right? Which is why I think we're getting more interest and more inquiries from outside of the immediate area. So I'm hopeful that some of those will actually pan out. And quite frankly, I'm hopeful that as we go down Steiger, it will open up the north side over towards the regional trail and those properties for some sort of a quaint development that keeps the charm and the small town feel and charm, and just extends it further down. So.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with Glen Lake over in Minnetonka.
Yeah, that's Tim Nichols, isn't it? Glen Lake.
That's where he has Zivago is built out there.
And that's where my parents had lived for 21 years. And what was nice about that is they have not only Presbyterian homes, but they also built the Glen. That was right there by Byerly's. Fresh Seasons was also there, but it was basically right there where Byerly's now is. And what's so wonderful about that community is that, and that might be something to look at too, is that they have the post office, the banks, Gold Nugget is there. Everything, Dairy Queen was there, they're closed now, but everything is right, dentist, everything is all within walking distance. And that's what's wonderful. It's like it dropped right there on top of each other. And even though everything was so close, you see seniors out all the time with their walkers, whether it's raining, snow, whatever. And that's the kind of community, you look at it in your vision, and instead of having to walk all the way down, I kind of like, every time I see this building, I'm kind of like, oh, that should have been senior housing, and I throw up in my mouth a little bit, that's been on that committee for so long. But I kind of envision this kind of being like a Glen Lake, if we could, where seniors are out going to a grocery store, or to the restaurants, or to the little stores that are now here, and that kind of looking at that's a wonderful model, because it's been there for so long, and people are, going to different restaurants that are there, and the seniors are out and about and not in their apartment.
So I actually toured that facility with Tim Nichols. And I can't remember which one it was, but the one where the Golden Nuggets, is the Golden Nugget restaurant right there in that same complex? Right. Okay, so that's the one I went through. That's a very nice, right, and I would love to get something like that, and that's what Tim Nichols, at least a version of that, is what he originally was talking about for the 13 and a half acres. At this point, he's supposed to come back with us with something, and we haven't heard from him for a while now, have we?
We've been trying to get in touch with him. We just haven't made contact for the last 2 months, really.
Got it.
But we will continue to try.
So.
And I assume he's still working on, that if he'd had the problem solved, he would be in contact.
I know that when I spoke with him before, if you remember back when the council, there was a preliminary plan that clearly I'm sure was going to change multiple times before anything ever got approved, but he had restaurants, he had the grocery store, he had various things in there. One of the things, he was working with another gentleman, and I can't remember his name, that did the commercial side of that. And Tim Nichols did the housing side of that. And they were working, part of what, at that time at least, when I last spoke to him, which is a while now, it was trying to bring all of those different pieces together, a grocery store, which is really kind of what they wanted to anchor this, and then also bringing other retail businesses in. And that it takes a long time to get everybody to get lined up and commit to something, because it takes a lot of time and planning and cost actually for them to even get a proposal together before they would come to the city. So we're hopeful, but yeah, it's not dead, but it just I think you know at this point as much as we know. So not as far as I know. He hasn't come back and said.
For the city, we're still pursuing things.
Right.
And the 2040, we're still looking at, that's on there.
They presented us a draft to the steering committee, and we're waiting for, the finals to be able to go through it and make some additional comments. But the council will be going through it very shortly after we do. In fact, I think we have a joint council meeting with the steering committee.
Council's going to have it on the 29th.
Because you would hate to see people leave the city, because I know people who have left the city and have moved to other cities who have the senior housing. And
Right.
you would hate to see our seniors who have lived here for years and years up and have to leave to go to another city to get that kind of housing.
Right, we've heard the same thing. But we can only do so much to push the developers along, right?
But it's always on our forefront. We're always thinking about it. So we're hopeful.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Paul Hyperla, 1340 Narcissus Curve. I think this discussion is interesting, but I just wonder about the perspective. So if you look at Victoria, within 6 miles there's 11 grocery stores. Why in the world do we think a grocer is going to want to build in downtown because we want it? I think there's this aspect of letting the businesses figure out what's going to win and what's going to lose. Senior housing as an example, if we look at demographics and where it's shifting, I think there's probably an opportunity there, but does it have to only be in this little downtown swath of land? Because Victoria is bigger than just the downtown area on 5.
Right.
And so if there's going to be some sort of planned community with mixed use, there's a lot of opportunity. So, I mean, that's one aspect of this, and I think we've got to start to take a hard look at ourselves and say, even though we want grocery, with Aldi moving into Waconia, within Chanhassen, you've got Hy-Vee, you've got 3 Cubs, you've got Byerly's, you've got Kowalski's, all in the area at Targets. The likelihood of a grocer, and I used to work for SuperValue, moving into this town is very, very, very unlikely. And so just looking at the role of government, not necessarily to be picking winners and losers, but to create an environment that allows a developer and or businesses come in and look at it and say, aha, that's where I want to be. I think, that's where I would just echo that.
Well,
that
I think you raise valid points, and in the comprehensive plan, there's parts of the plan where that kind of development can occur in Victoria outside of the downtown. And I guarantee you, I wouldn't be opposed to that, right? I happen to be talking about, the parking and the other things kind of all tied to the, if you will, the central business district, this part of downtown. But what is there, two or three spots? There's big commercial or industrial down along, if you look think of the intersection of County Road 10 and County Road 11 along there, but there's also this kind of mix, kind of, Paul, what you were talking about. What's the intersection just west of town on 5? There was one spot there in the comprehensive plan?
Yeah, Rolling Acres Road and Highway 5.
All right, and there was another one south on 11. Was it at Marsh Lake Road? Or
There's
no?
one at 43 and 10, Engler.
43 and 10, that's where it was. And there was one other that was, I'm trying to remember, I don't have the plan sitting here in front of me. Was there another one kind of south and west of us? Or was it just those two primarily?
Well, I think, and then the larger industrial commercial development that was right on County Road 11. And Engler, that's a pretty substantial piece of property. So there could certainly be some commercial within there, some high density housing.
Yeah,
retail.
Specific to this County Road 10 and 11, you've heard the council talk at various times recently about extending water and sewer lines from Lake Town 11, which is just north of Marsh Lake Road and County Road 11, extending that water and sewer lines down County Road 11 to get down there to get that development. I don't know if we can sit here today and predict when housing and when development on its own natural path, if you will, pushes us down there. But I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't take a number of years, right? Probably 10 years to get all the way down there, unless the city did something earlier. What I've been doing is I've been talking with both the county and Chaska and Carver. If in fact we were to get a large development or something like what Paul was saying, where somebody would come in and say, "Here, I've got this this same kind of concept, if you will. Think about in your mind's eye about what Tim Nichols brought forward for the 13.5 acres. So if somebody brings us something like that, but on a bigger scale, because we've got more land down south, and says, I want to put that in Victoria now, what I've been talking to the county and the neighboring cities about is Chaska has water, sewer, just about a half a mile east of Victoria down there. And that could be extended for much less money to the Victoria taxpayers, and we could tie into their system at least until such time as Victoria itself moves down there, in which time we could tie them back into the Victoria system. But what I've asked the county and the neighboring cities to do is look into, could we kind of lay out some sort of a framework so that if a developer comes in here and wants to develop next year, could we actually get Chaska to extend that out? Because when you start thinking about the tax base for Victoria, if we could get that developed in the next couple of years and with something that the residents want, I just think that's a boon for the area. It will prompt other development and also saves us having to wait 10 years to get water and sewer down there, or the citizens alone having to foot. I have no idea what $5 million, $10 million to run lines all the way down there if nobody else was involved. It's a significant amount of money for us to do it.
Yes, because it's a force main coming back up.
And it would require a plant down there, right? A pump station.
Yes.
So to ask the taxpayers to fund all of that, if it's going to cost us $7-8 million to do that, that's a pretty big pill to swallow without getting anything back from development. So,
Yeah, and to Paul's point, I think he brings up a really good point. How much government involvement should we have in trying to pick these winners and losers? And I think our grocery store is a perfect example of that. The residents wanted a grocery store, and all of our surveys said we wanted a grocery store. We pumped a lot of money into that grocery store. There was a lot of subsidies in there. 4 houses were purchased. That land was sold to the developer for $1. We've got TIF money wrapped up into that. There's a lot of tax dollars wrapped up in that grocery store, and that we were trying to pick a winner there, and it failed. So to your point, that's an excellent point. We've got to be careful. We don't want to trip over ourselves doing whatever it takes to get both, and that goes to senior housing as well. It's got to work. It's got to be a plan that can work, and if we end up forcing it, we could end up with another failure, and that's something we can't afford. So, and so that's got to be smart. It's got to be smart development. So, what we want and what can work might be two very different things.
So, any other questions? Don't be shy. We don't bite.
What percentage of the zone land is for industrial? If I think about the tax base and reducing residential impact on the tax base and increasing that, obviously, a clean industrial, whether it's high-tech, biomedical, what Chaska did with that high-tech environment or some sort of college environment on that south side of Victoria, what percentage of land in the city of Victoria is zoned industrial?
Good question, but without knowing what the actual numbers are, I would guess it's a
Very
small percentage.
Very small right now, less than 1%, I would guess, because,
But even with the development along 10 and 11, it may go to 4 or 5% if we're lucky.
yeah, I think
Probably
I
even
saw
less
that
than that.
number at 3 or 4% is,
Right.
with the size that they're looking at now, which is, I think, is 300 or 400 acres, but still, it's a small piece.
So I can add a little more color, if you will. So I've had a number of discussions because of the road congestions and the problems in Victoria. There's going to be some follow-up meetings, and hopefully something will come out of it that we can actually report some progress on some of this. But one of the discussions I continually have with the county and the county commissioners is I believe County Road 10 is going to become the main east-west corridor, not Highway 5, to try to make 4 lanes, Highway 5 4 lanes. There's talk and there's, I think, some initiative and some effort to get it out to Bavaria Road and Rolling Acres Road to get 4 lanes that far. But to get it from there through downtown Victoria is going to be hugely expensive, hugely expensive. Ergo, in talking with the county, the land is far less expensive, and they've got plenty of room to put a 4-lane divided highway, kind of like they've done in Chaska. If you go down to County Road 10, they can run that all the way out to Waconia. What I would see is a lot of this industrial or this mixed use or high density. What I would like to see is that corridor become not chemical plants, but high tech or similar kinds of industries that can help fund and take the load off of the Victoria taxpayers and get those businesses going. And conceptually, as you walk away from County Road 10, you'd have maybe some of the more higher density, lower cost housing behind the commercial, backing up to the commercial. And as you get further away from that, then you start getting into more of the single family homes and maybe some more of the more expensive homes. So conceptually, that's kind of how I view that. How it'll come out and how it will develop will be dependent on developers. I don't believe the government should be, to Councilmember Gregory's point, I don't think the government should be in business. What we need to do is we need to focus on the infrastructure that business needs and keep our hands there and not get involved in picking winners or losing or investing in businesses. The only time that I think I could end up supporting taxpayer money in businesses is something where the residents of the city clearly say they want that. They want to take the risk. They're willing to have their taxes pay for it. Without that kind of a clear indication from the residents, I'm not going to allocate or support taxpayers' money going into businesses. It just, I don't think government belongs in business. We need to support businesses, but not be a business partner, if you will. Dick?
In the context that you were just discussing, one of the things that I know I mentioned to the council was that there's a problem with trying to figure out the long-term plan for Highway 5 as it comes through the city. What I wanted to ask council members tonight was if they would support funding of a plan that looks at the downtown and looks at this Highway 5 with some of the kind of concepts that you were just mentioning earlier. That because if Highway 5 ever was 4 lanes coming through downtown, we lose all of the main characteristics we have with our downtown area. You know, the ease of walking through downtown all of a sudden becomes a problem when we start to look like Chanhassen with 4 lanes right through the middle of town. And, you know, how do we handle the walking coming from south of Highway 5, and what do we do? So I think, there's plenty of time to do this, but I think what we need to do is to put together a plan for downtown and what we see for Highway 5 once it gets to Rolling Acres and that may well be what you were just talking about with County 10, but an idea of how then to handle zoning, give everybody time to be able to plan on exactly how that zoning would work based on where the roadways are, and then be very careful as we look at how we are planning the zones near the highway, which could well be in light industrial or distribution centers or whatever down a highway, that we also look at how do we set up border zoning that makes some sense so that you don't have private homes and residences backed up to an industrial park, and try to figure that all out.
You're almost like reading my mind. When I was talking about some of what I was thinking for downtown, right? What I'd really like to do is just kind of call a temporary halt to anything and develop a comprehensive plan that goes from the old sports park, Midwest
Water Sports.
Midwest Water Sports, all the way out to Alphabet Junction. Actually go through that, encourage and solicit residents' input, and come up with a design that everybody agrees to, and then the job of the council would be to simply execute on that design. I haven't seen a design that goes from end to end. I've seen bits and pieces. I've heard that, well, this was always planned or this was always planned, right? I've never seen a comprehensive end-to-end view, and in my opinion, I think that would be worth it to have that developed. And to me, the key is significant public input, because I really want the public to say this is what we want. And to Dick's point, the one thing I've been thinking about, and I have no idea how to solve this problem, is we have to get safe, easy access, pedestrian and bike traffic from south of Highway 5 into the downtown. And I, for the life of me, can't think of anything. You could always put a pedestrian bridge over 5, but that's going to be expensive, and that probably not the most attractive thing. But if you don't do that, how do you get people safely across that street? I've had a number of people tell me, even when they walked in the crosswalk with the light, when they had the white pedestrian sign flashing, they've almost gotten hit. In fact, one person told me they actually did get hit. I think you knew who that was. So the point being, that's a problem that we need to figure out, and I think that would be part of this comprehensive design. It's also part of, at least in the back of my head, extending potential quaint businesses up County Road 11 for some of those homes if homeowners want to do that. Now, I'm not saying any of this is written in stone, but I think these are the kind of ideas, and I'm sure other people have other ideas that I haven't thought of. I would love to go through that process with the residents, come up with something, get residents to vote on it, or get something where we can come up with a clear winner, and then say, that's the plan we're going to go ahead and execute on. So,
I think there's lots of ways that you can accomplish. I ride my bike across to the bike trail just about every day, so I come south of 5 and across, and I usually come the one road over, not at the stoplight, because it's easier, and it's less likelihood of getting hit when I'm trying to go straight across. So at that point, but
up by the bank, across there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, right there. So, but I think about that because I also walk down to Classic Cars and Car Night in Victoria through that same path, and it made sense to me that, boy, it's kind of nice. I grew up in Wisconsin, so I'm a Green Bay Packer fan. You go to Green Bay and everybody parks on the city streets, and it's that environment. And I think about that as extending that south of downtown and bringing that in, as long as there's easy foot traffic across 5 and making that mechanism. The other thing, though, is on a completely different subject. There are policies and ordinances within the city, and in the area of transparency and trying to make that available to the city, you're looking for citizen input. What's being done to look at how we publish and make easily accessible and available ordinances and policies that the city has, so that we as citizens can review them, can talk about them, and then bring either concerns or recommendations back to the council with that?
So I'm actually working with a group of residents now, looking at policies. If people remember back to the vision statement I put out at the beginning of the year, this is one of the things, and I think there's a lot of policy work that the city needs. But before I go forward, let me step back for residents that may not be familiar with it. we're a statutory B city. So what that means is the council acts, if you will, as the legislative body. We approve policies, change ordinances, and that the city manager and the staff then execute or implement those policies. So that conceptually, that's basically how it works. As I've gone through and I've reviewed, I believe there's a lot of gaps in various policies where policies don't exist. And there's inconsistency. There's, in fact, the policy book that I received 8 months ago. There were only 2 policies that were signed, one of which I signed. So we went to a statutory B city in January of 2013. And I see these gaps. The other thing I found recently, and we're continuing to explore this, and there's still a lot more work that has to be done, is I've found so far 2 instances, and maybe it's the only 2 instances, I don't know, but I found 2 instances where we as a city are not even complying with our own ordinances. And that needs to be fixed, right? So the ordinances themselves are online. If you go to the city website, you look at city code, you can link, and then you can put in search terms. It's actually a pretty functional way to look up things. The policies, as far as I know, they're not online, right?
No.
And Doug and I have talked about this a little bit. He's waiting for me. He's come up with a standardized policy format. What I do for a living, I deal with a lot of policies and procedures. And Doug, working with Gwen, right, came up with a new format. I want to, once I've had a chance to do a little more research, we're going to bring up a policy format, bring it to the council for review and approval, and then at that point we're going to have to start converting any existing policies into a standardized format that basically has all of the core details that a policy should have. When it was approved, who it was approved by, what's the resolution number. Then as you modify that, those revisions need to be kept because you need to be able to go back and look at the history of all this. And when you find a policy doesn't work, you need to be able to revise it. That doesn't exist. And you look at the policies, at least that I was given, and they're all over the board, all sorts of different formats. You can't see where a policy was actually approved. So to me, this is all got to get cleaned up, if you will. And that's something I'm looking at. But until I've got a chance to finish the review, I don't want to come in and make a report that's only half complete. Councilmember Gregory, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree. I think we should. That is something we do need to create more access to. Let's get a format down. Let's get it online, put it on the website, not only the ordinances, but the policies as well. Just be good practice.
Another thing too, there's actually a third ordinance that the ordinance that deals with the committees. The committees that are extensions of the council, and I think our ordinances need to reflect that. And how the committees are governed and run, I think also needs to be addressed in our ordinances. I don't think our ordinance does a good job dealing with that. So, other questions? Yep, go ahead.
Larry Gooby, 7848 Bavaria Road. Just a quick comment and question on the parking. It's my understanding that there is a consultant who has been hired at this point to do a parking study for downtown. Is that correct?
Correct.
Correct. It seems that if this consultant is out there right now doing this parking study, that all of the talk about buying this piece of property and buying another piece of property and doing this, it seems like it's really premature. Would be my until this consultant comes in with his report.
So we know the consultant that when is that going to? That's not going to happen until after the restaurant opens.
No, Mr. Mayor, we talked about not starting that until June because of, get the summer traffic here to see what it really looked like. But the proposal to do the study will be coming back to the council either on the 29th or the 11th. I can't remember which. And then we'll start going. So it's probably not going to start till July now, probably. And I assume it'll take a month or two to do that. But I think that's basically where we're going as far as the parking thing is wait till we see what that study shows.
Right. So So I have been thinking about this. The council did approve this back in April, March, something like that. I don't,
You told us to get a proposal. And
Yeah,
now
yeah.
we canceled the last meeting, so we couldn't.
and I did vote for that. But quite frankly, I have been having second thoughts. I'm not sure. I think we almost need to call a moratorium, step back, and do a broader study for what do we want the downtown to be. I'd rather put the money there. The other thing, we were going to meet with the consultant that was going to do the study. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, and it's the same consultant that we met with for the comprehensive plan. So I didn't have that meeting with the individual yet, and I want to meet with them to find out what their, if you will, their methodology is, how they're going to go at this. Because I heard that there were some comments made in the comprehensive, the steering committee, where there was some discussion that the outcome of the study was already determined. Which, if that is true, then why are we going to do the study? I don't want to go and spend taxpayer money on something where if we already know the answer or we already know the outcome, then we shouldn't be doing that. So I plan to ask these questions when we have the next council meeting and this comes up. And depending on what the council wants to do, I think I'm probably going to ask them to let's not do that. Let's do a broader study for all of downtown and look at it from a more long-term holistic view, end-to-end, do that, which I think would provide more value, because within that, we could look at all sorts of parking options and development options and other choices, and not, I don't think it's money well spent to just do one slice of this, and especially if the consultant, if it's accurate that the consultant said he already knows what the outcome of the study is going to be before we've done the study, I think then we probably need to find somebody else that's totally independent and never been here to come in and look at it with a fresh eye. So,
With parking in mind, we did, so far it hasn't been finalized, but Steiger Lake Lane has been moving forward through the process, and I believe that assessment vote is coming up on 29th.
Right, before you on the 29th will be the accepting the bids for the project, which did come in under estimate.
Okay.
And doing the assessment, levying the assessment, and actually we're having a public hearing for the assessments, and the option to award the project if you want to.
So with that in mind, I know there's a number of business owners and even residents that are questioning the logic of building Steiger Lake Lane, putting parking, which is somewhat distanced from our downtown core. But it was a staff recommendation, and there are some good logical reasons why we are moving forward with that project. First of all, it does provide more parking, which is, many people argue that we do need parking. But there's, and we are kind of under a construction time crunch, and the project needs to move forward if we are going to build it this year. But in addition to the parking, and it's going to help with that, it will also possibly spur some redevelopment on the Narkey property, on the Kelly Green property, which could all be good things. But and another issue is a safety concern. There's a lot of foot traffic going back and forth between downtown core and down to Inky, and this redevelopment project would create a nice, safe sidewalk, well-lit walking space back and forth, which is all a good thing. With respect to the overall core parking, there's the property owner on Quamuklit that people think that would be a better acquisition, but that's a good debate. But this Steiger Lake Lane, it's moving forward. I think it's a good project. Whether it comes to fruition or not, time will tell. But there's logical reasons why we're moving forward with that.
Do we have a contract with that consultant to do the parking? Is he under contract right now?
no, the contract's coming before the council. You said in July or June? 29th of May?
June.
All right. So we'll discuss, the council will discuss that in the next meeting.
There's a lot of flexibility there.
Right, because we haven't committed to it. We said we were going to do it. We got the the proposal coming in. Do you know what the proposal is? What the cost is?
You talking about the parking?
Yeah, the parking study?
I have not seen it.
Oh,
You talking about Steiger or the park? I haven't seen a parking proposal.
Got,
Steiger on the 29th, we bid it out, and I don't know the number. I think,
right, no, I was referring specifically to the parking study.
Okay.
I don't know the number.
We haven't got that yet, okay. Other questions, Dick?
Do we have a policy in terms of what type of parking we want? I know that was a discussion that we had one night with the steering committee. The idea of, do you want immense parking lots, or do you want some multi-level parking that might be discreetly behind other buildings, those kind of things? Is there some direction or policy that we have?
To my knowledge, the council hasn't taken a position on that.
I haven't found anything in the shared parking ordinance or the parking ordinances, the other parking ordinances that says that, but I haven't read every single word in there. At least I've read the shared parking ordinance, but I haven't read cover to cover the other parking ordinances. That said, this ties back into my earlier comments about I'd like to see a more, we step back, kind of call a moratorium and trying to do a piecemeal work. We step back and come up with a comprehensive plan for the entire end-to-end and look at that. And then from that, that's where we can maybe actually identify property for surface parking or other kind of parking or a garage. And I'll give you an example of things I've heard over the time, and I'm not saying any of these are realistic, but to give you an example, if you go over the bridge on 5, there's those buildings down there that are kind of in a hollow. And I'm not suggesting we move them or do anything, but some people have said, boy, if the city ever got those properties, you could put in a multi-tiered deck there, and it's kind of hidden because it's kind of down in that hollow. Yeah, I mean, you could. Those are the kind of things that I think need to be brought forward and publicly debated as to, are they viable? Is it something we would want to consider? I don't know the answer to that, but if we have some sort of comprehensive plan, we can put into that various options that we can then consider and debate publicly. And I wouldn't want to say it's written in stone, but when we have the concept laid out and we agree, then we can always move some of the pieces around within the concept depending on where the best value is for the taxpayer.
The discussion came up with the idea of pedestrian traffic and making it easy to get to various businesses. And, areas like 50th and France or downtown Wayzata where there are multiple, they aren't right on the main street, but they're within a half a block of it, and, it makes it easier to walk, and it's, you still got the businesses on the main frontage roads, but you've at least got good access to parking.
Right, and I want to have those discussions with the public. I